What's the winning recipe?
It's not actually your baby, it's just a business.
And I mean, I guess selfishly speaking,
real thing. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, right?
I don't know what I'm doing.
I'd say watch George's YouTube channel.
Of course. Hello， 大家好，我是乔先生，欢迎回到 Unblock。今天呢，我们又到了边设计边谈这个话题。这次呢，我邀请到一个很特别的来宾，他不是设计师，但是呢，他是在新创这个环境已经工作很久，而且呢，也开始了自己的新的公司。那在这边，我就想要找他来跟我聊一聊，说到底为什么在新创公司工作这么的令人着迷？还有，如果你是刚开始正在找第一份工作的话，为什么要选择新创公司？欢迎 Harrison。Hi. Obviously, I've known you for a bit, but not my audience. Can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Harrison Johnson. I was the first employee at a startup called Managed by Q, and I'm now the co-founder and co-CEO of Driveway.
Yeah, so we met at Driveway. Can you recall what your first impression of me was like?
Very outgoing, very
really?
sociable, very personable. I just remember, you kind of owned the room, and I think I'm someone who likes to also own the room, and so, but funny enough, I felt like we hit it off.
Oh, good. We didn't start a fight right away because of that.
No, there's enough room in the room for both of us, for sure.
What's your journey like in the startup environment?
Candidly, I knew I really wanted to be in New York. And a startup was just the only job that I had coming out of graduation. I didn't think I wanted to be doing sales, which was my first role at a startup. But I remember when I went to the interview, we were working out of someone's apartment, and someone's taking a phone call in the bathroom, and it was just very exciting, and it felt like a place where I could have a big contribution. And so I think that's one lesson learned, was just being very open-minded about the opportunities that you get. I ended up really, really enjoying just being at that early stage and being able to build something with a team.
To a lot of designers, that's one of the things that fulfills them, but just a lot of ownership in terms of crafting. What do you like about that aspect of things?
I guess it's the learning journey. At least in a sales role, it would start with you're talking with someone and you hear about a problem and you think, oh, that's interesting. That's maybe an area of our product that we're not serving super well. And so that process of feeling like, hey, I think I'm actually onto something here, bringing in maybe your design partner or your engineers and being able to see that idea kind of come to life. Turning that back over to your users and seeing how they react to the feature, seeing how excited they are.
Yeah.
It was just very cool to be able to do that in a very quick way. And I think that that's something that startups kind of provide you.
Have you thought about moving into big tech?
Yeah, I have considered it. Obviously, a lot of our work decisions are a reflection of our personal choices as well. And so, I think maybe once I have some kids, I'm a bit older, a little bit more tired, maybe that's a good time for me to be in big tech. But for now, I really enjoy that pace and that speed of work.
Why would you, or even I think a lot of people, think of bigger tech companies almost like a retirement retreat? What is that big difference?
The hard thing about startups is there's just so much that you could be doing. So at least for me, I enjoy that process of, lying in bed awake and thinking about, all the things that we could be building. There are also a lot of people who get maybe overly invested in the startup that they're working on. Some people talk about it as their baby, which it's not actually your baby. It's just a business. If you're looking for something, beyond yourself to be fulfilling and rewarding, and maybe, you don't have that family, I think it's a really great opportunity, especially for people early in their career.
Do you feel like working as an employee versus working as a co-founder on a startup being very different?
Yeah, I had a pretty good idea that I wanted to start a company for a couple years. And so I think if you are thinking about starting something, I'd recommend just talking to people about it, because there was probably, a 3-year period of time before that was actually happening. in terms of being on the other side of it as an employee, there were just a lot of times that I remember our CEO at Managed by Q doing something, and I'd be like, why is he asking us to do this? Or like, why are we doing this training? And when you're on the CEO side, you have like a very different perspective. I think the main thing that you want when you're a senior leader is to make sure that your team is really honest with you and very forthcoming. That's not necessarily something that you need when you're in that employee seat.
For anyone who's just starting, I actually made a video about whether they should choose big companies or a startup. And at the time, I recommended going to a startup because I think it's important for you to build your hard skills. Versus, I think when you go to a bigger environment, a lot of learnings will be on soft skills. So like, what's your recommendation if anyone asks you?
It's a very good question because I think both are important. I do think if you had to pick one or the other, the nice thing about startups from a learning environment perspective is not only do you have the faster learning cycles, but you also have more responsibility and autonomy in your decision making. And so I find that, if you're making more decisions and you're able to see which are proving out right or proving out wrong, even if it is soft skills or hard skills, you're able to learn faster than, maybe in a larger corporate environment where you're not going to get that learning or get that feedback as quickly as you would at a startup.
And I mean, I guess selfishly speaking.
But I do think if you don't have that background, if you don't have that resume or that experience, you're more likely to find, a startup that's willing to take a bet on you, if you can show that you're really, really hungry. And if you're really, really passionate about the opportunity. Oftentimes, to your point, it's about that like resilience and endurance and being able to push through the hard. But, if you come out of it on the other side, you should have all these, great design skills because you made it happen.
If you can't get into your dream company, let's say if it is a big company, you just like use this as a first milestone and then transition into what you really want.
For example, I knew I wanted to start a company before I knew I wanted to go into product. And so I knew if I wanted to, achieve this outcome, hey, maybe a good intermediary step would be getting that product experience.
Now let's get real a little bit. What is the con of working in startup?
Oh man, I would say I suffered from workaholism, if that's a word, for a little bit.
I don't know if it's a word, but it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? I really did feel like Managed by Q was my baby. I was the first employee there, and I worked there for 6 years, and I would wear the company shirt, and my identity was like very tied up in it, and that was very fulfilling, until the company was acquired and divested, and then there's like no more company, and you kind of learn a lesson that like, you need to be able to detach your personal fulfillment, from that business.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about designers in startup.
The typical framework I would look at for evaluating design comes down to hierarchy and harmony. And so, how good is a designer at identifying what's important, and how good is a designer at, identifying patterns or patterns of behavior? And I think in a startup, there's a third criteria that's extra important, which is the creative aspect and that creative problem solving. It really does come down to a scarcity of resources thing. Okay, we don't have the time, we don't, know how to ship that feature yet, we don't have the budget. That kind of creative problem solving skill set is extra important for the early design hires at a startup.
Can you give us an example of a moment that you're pleasantly surprised by a designer's work or input or anything?
I was working with a designer on Managed by Q's marketplace product, and it was our most mature product line, and we had built a lot of features, and the designer I was working with, she was a little burnt out, she was getting a little tired. I was like, what is so demotivating about working on this product? And she just said, there are like 5 features we've shipped that I hate, and I would love to just redo the whole, the whole thing. And we gave her the time and space to like put together that prototype, and it was a bold move. We got rid of like half the features we had shipped in the last 2 years, which was like a hard emotional conversation. It got a little personal, but it was totally the right call. And so I really appreciated her being willing to kind of voice the frustrations or the struggles that she felt she was having with the product.
That reminds me of the difference between startup and big tech as well, when I was working in bigger places, I could tell that harmony is prioritized. I just think that like a lot of times, especially in those environments, because when you try to push a product over, you actually need a lot of buy-in from all these different people. And so it's easy to feel like, okay, well, at the end of the day, if I even want to make a product real, I need to get these sponsors and I need to have really great harmonious relationships with them. So why would I try to sabotage them by saying things like maybe what she said to you? But I think in a startup, to vocalize what you actually want to do for the sake of the product might be a little more rewarded.
Yeah, and I think, going back to your earlier point about where you learn the soft skills. If you're used to being an early stage designer and coming in and being like, we're going to delete half of our features. If you said that at a big tech company, that'd be a good opportunity.
How did you get hired in the first place? A very common thing that designers brought up, that they feel frustrated that they don't have good design leaders. They don't have good design guidance because a lot of times they simply work with products or they work with engineers. What would you say to them if they're just like, I don't know what I'm doing?
I'd say watch George's YouTube channel.
Of course, that's a given.
But seriously, I think that this is the hardest thing. Unless you have a co-founder who has that experience, you're kind of on your own. And I don't have a great answer for this, George. I think it comes down to good books, watching good YouTube channels. Frankly, don't rely on them to figure this out for you. Leadership at this startup, they're running around, with their heads cut off. And so, you need to take a little bit more ownership of that learning and development. So that is one thing to watch out for. It's a good call.
Yeah. Okay, a few things I could recommend too. Like one, if you are just starting to look for a job and you're like, that guidance is critical to me, that's like the only thing I look for a company, then I think you either look for bigger spaces or you can look for startups that the founders or like there are design leaders who are mature, right? If this is so critical to you, you don't have to compromise. You can pick places like that. That said, if you're like, I want that, but it's not the most important thing, or like you're already in startups that are not like that, you know what area you want to learn, right? So you can initiate that. You can go, you can find conferences, you can find online courses, things that can train yourself. Then you get to learn. So it's not that you can't learn. You can't learn maybe internally, but you can learn externally.
And startups are willing to make those investments. So don't be afraid. If there is a course that you want, I wouldn't be afraid to just, ask, because the worst thing that could happen is they say no.
Yeah.
That's not that bad.
What's the winning recipe for someone to go into an interview with a startup?
When I'm interviewing people, my favorite question to ask is, what's your personal North Star? And what I'm looking for is to basically make sure that their personal North Star is aligned with what the company can provide and what the job opportunity is. I think that's generally good advice before you are interviewing somewhere or before you get too attached to a job, is really make sure that what you want personally, professionally, what's fulfilling for you is what you will get from this company. And don't be afraid to have that conversation with the hiring manager and just be frank about your career expectation. And I think that shows not only just like a level of maturity, but also those are the people who end up being most successful in their roles, as people where their personal and professional fulfillment are aligned.
Okay, I think that's about everything for today. Obviously, if you have any questions you want to ask Harrison, I would highly recommend you to leave a comment down below. If you want Harrison to answer directly, I would recommend you do that in English. And if you want to hear us talk more, let me know and I'll try my best to invite Harrison again. Thank you, this has been fun.
This is great. I had a really fun time.
好，那今天就这样子，拜拜。